got off track early. That's bad hosting, but it is what it is.
We're fine.
We're here. Flowing. We vibing.
We flowing.
No, you know what, Scott? I say that, but there's always that one critic. Foots is all over the place. I am. I'm a wild card. Here we go.
You can't pay attention to all the.
I know. Don't listen to the comments. You worried about that, Scott. Here we go. The man, the myth, the legend. Here's Johnny.
Yeah.
Oh, no drop. There we go. From mini camp and we got some footwork highlights. So we get
yeah. I think Johnny was moving some of his magic over there.
I'm telling you, John, what's going on in mini camp? How we feeling?
What's going on, man?
Tell me the
I'd
truth.
love for them to let me take some videos. That'd be fun. So yeah, I would say the number one story is just that Micah Parsons was out there today. He didn't participate, but he was out there and he spent about 30 minutes talking to Jerry Jones. So that got a lot of our attention, and that's probably Jerry doing that on purpose. But they also were on the far end of the field, so it wasn't like it was some super obvious thing. But Micah said after it, there was no contract talked about during that lengthy discussion. But I don't have any better feeling today after talking to Micah Parsons than I did a couple weeks ago about like that thing could come together in the next couple of days. That thing might drag into the training camp. But I will say he said that he's ready to be. He's going to be in Oxnard regardless, but it'll be what's he doing on the field. I'm willing to bet that if he doesn't have a new contract, he won't be doing any practicing, and he won't practice until he gets any new a deal done. So I think that.
Put a pin in that, John.
What's that?
Put a pin in that.
Yeah, that's the biggest news. So I just want to. That's the thing that stood out most from camp by far today. First mini camp practice mandatory. Perfect attendance. We didn't see Trayvon Diggs working, but he was in the facility. Right. And so they did have everybody out there. So that's a good sign. And I know some people think, well, it's mandatory, so obviously everybody would be there. But as you saw across the NFL today, when teams are starting their mini camps, guys like Trey Hendrickson and TJ Watt, Terry McLaurin weren't at their team's mandatory mini camp. So this is a prime time if you want a new contract to not show up. But Micah Parsons was out there. So that was the number one thing by far. After that, I'd say that it seems like the George Pickens rapport is growing with Dak. I thought Pickens looked solid. CeeDee Lamb looks like CeeDee Lamb. But there are a couple plays today where actually like Jonathan Mingo stood out to me, like made some solid catches.
Okay, so that's real. That's real.
Yeah, one from Dak and then another one from Joe Milton.
Yeah.
To me, and it's a short sample size, so I hate to put too much out there in that, but I guess maybe I'm overvaluing it, maybe not. I don't know. We'll see it on the field, but Joe Milton to me just has more confidence than I felt like I ever saw from Trey Lance. I'm not saying that there's not things in Trey Lance's game that weren't good and not a reason why, you'd have interest in him or anything like that. But it's Joe Milton, like when he's out there, he has a lot of confidence. He does not look like a guy that was a late round pick. He looks like he was probably a day 2 pick, and so he's looked pretty solid. And then trying to think what else kind of stood out, but other than that, again, it's so hard to take anything from the run game because they're not really hitting. They're not really trying to do anything. For example, a great example of what little they can do is there's a deep ball that I thought was a little underthrown, and Kaiir Elam probably should have picked it off, but he knocked it away. And so it's like, it is still a pass breakup, but he probably should have caught it. But there's also a part of where they're also being coached not to hit anybody. They don't want any contact like that. They don't want any injuries. So those are probably the ones that stood out most to me from the play on the field. I thought the linebackers looked solid. It continued to be where Leah Fau and Damone Clark were with the second team, and Sanborn and Murray were with the ones. So yeah, pretty similar to that. But I'm more interested in that. I don't keep track of everybody else that's out there that covers the team. So I'm interested for you guys to ask me some questions and things you saw. I'm entertained by this now.
I just want to ask you, is this more like 7-on-7 or kind of like 11-on-11 type of vibes, or
exactly? I shouldn't say exactly, but it's very similar to what OTAs were. They, to a certain extent, it's a condensed version of kind of what their regular practices are, where it's a lot of stretching to start out. Then they break up into individual. Then they do special teams. The special teams portion, that's where Micah was spending the most of the time talking to Jerry. That's a portion where Micah's usually not really doing much when the special teams is out there. He's usually off to the side anyway. And then they get into team drills, which is 11 on 11. And then they do some 7 on 7. And then they do a little bit more 11 on 11. So it's a little bit like what you'll see out at training camp, except that just there's no pads on. So it's kind of like a, kind of a 2-hand touch type football.
You know what? I need to ask you this, though. It's one of those things with special teams, because I kind of like waved it off because it's special teams. Are you seeing any drop off because Bone Fossil left and he was like special? He was special to us. So I don't even know who the special team coach is now. How's that looking?
Yeah, I will say like today was a day where they were working on like a lot of
Morrison. Okay.
Yeah, they were working on a lot of like trick play stuff where like Angers throwing and stuff like that. And there was nothing like, I mean, we see that stuff during the week too. And that's the thing when like, if you aren't out there very often, you might see a play and be like, damn, they're going to run this on Sunday. And they almost never do. It's just stuff that they work on and things like that. And so there was a lot more of that stuff they worked on today than they have in the previous days when we're out there. But no, I mean, nothing that really jumps out from that. Again, you can't hit. So it's hard to really get too much out of it. Obviously Kevontae Turpin is going to look good out there. He looks good out there when guys are trying to take his head off. So, also Deuce Vaughn had a nice run today, but again, not tackling to the ground. So that was one when it happened. I was like, I can't wait to see who takes this thing out of bounds and tries to make it sound like this is just, LaDainian Tomlinson in his prime, but I didn't see anything along those lines, but it was a nice run. I'll give him that.
Yeah.